Everybody, it's 6 o'clock, so we're ready to start. Welcome to Gloucester City Council Planning Committee. My name's Councillor Angela Conda. I'm chair, and this is Linda Castle, who is my vice chair. We will start by, I don't know if people would like to introduce themselves.
Good evening, Claire Haslam. I'm the Planning Development Manager.
I'm Craig Stock. I'm a Principal Planning Officer.
I'm Eulyn Joda McStay and I'm a Principal Conservation Officer.
Hi, I'm Mark Sweet, Gloucester County Council Highway Development Management Officer.
Hello, I'm Andrew Prevels. I'm a substitute on this committee for, who am I substitute for? Stephanie Chambers, and I'm an Abbeydale councillor.
Owen Weedald, Heppelcote councillor.
Councillor Rosanna Marshall, Barton and Treadwell.
Councillor Andy Lewis, Quetchy Seven Vale.
Councillor Liam Harris, also Quetchy Seven Vale.
Oliver Brown, Democratic and Electoral Services Officer.
I'm Surinder Atkar. I'm a planning solicitor and I'll be advising the committee on the procedure and the law during the course of the committee.
Thank you very much. The first item on the agenda is apologies. So we've had apologies for Councillor Tracy and Barmia and Councillors Alastair and Stephanie Chambers. And as we've heard, Councillor Gravels is standing in for Stephanie Chambers. Is anybody else substituting for any of those absent? No? Thank you. I'm sorry? Okay, well, if he's very late, he won't be able to join us. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Well, first of all, I need to tell everybody that the council itself is the landlord of 36 Eastgate Street, which is the first two applications. And in this context, we're acting impartially as a local planning authority.
Yes, I've got a declaration of interest. Right. I've also got a declaration of interests for items 5 and 6. I need to let the committee know that I attended the opening of the store but made no comment on the planning application, and I have no pre-form views on the application. I am sitting here impartially. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Minutes of the last meeting. Is everybody content for me to sign off as a true and accurate record of what took place? Thank you. Item 4 is late material. Has everybody had a chance to look at the late material? Let me know. I'll give you a chance to read it if you haven't. You've all scanned it. Thank you. So agenda item number 5 is the planning application number 1 for 36 Eastgate Street. We actually have 2 applications for this one address. So I'll ask the officer to introduce the case.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. The Chair is quite right. We've got 2 applications on the agenda at 36 Eastgate Street this evening. Just to make it clear at the outset, they are 2 different applications, both relating to the same site. Each application is distinct from one another. They're seeking consent for different things, are the subject of separate officer reports and separate recommendations, and are separate committee items, agenda items. This first application is an application seeking retrospective permission for external alterations to the shopfront unit at number 36, including new fascia boards to the front and the side elevations, and the installation of a roller shutter. In case you're wondering why these applications have been referred to committee, that is because both applications are on council-owned land and have received an objection, and that is one of the constitution triggers for committee referrals. The distinction between the 2 applications hopefully is clear from reading the officer reports, but if not, that will become clear hopefully throughout the presentation. I imagine many of you will be aware of the site, not least because it's near to the council's offices. We are on the section of Eastgate Street here towards the junctions with Brunswick Road and with Clarence Street, and on the south side of Eastgate Street. You may observe that the red line seems to terminate just before the end of the building. That's simply because the premises has a cantilever roof overhanging above it, which kind of extends forward of its front elevation. The application site itself is located on the corner of Queen's Walk and Eastgate Street. What we've got on this slide is a pair of photos, one looking broadly towards the cross and the other looking broadly towards Boots and then the former Argos beyond. And as I say, the premises itself, it is a unit within the council's ownership. It is within the wider Eastgate Shopping Centre complex, albeit it is accessed solely from Eastgate Street itself for customers and for staff alike. So there's no access from within the shopping centre. It has had a succession of retail tenants over the years. Cooperative Travel were based there for quite some time. Most recently in 2025, Vision Express moved to the premises in summer last year. And soon after moving to the premises, enacted a series of unauthorised alterations to the property. It's those unauthorised alterations which are the subject of this pair of applications, and those applications seek ultimately to regularise those alterations. The unit as such is, as you can see from the photos and the elevation drawings that we've got on the presentation, with a pair of doors in the middle of its front elevation, glazing to either side, etc. And that's the side elevation we can see here, taken from Queen's Walk, like so. So, as I said, the full and the advert application taken together seek to regularise the unauthorised alterations that took place to the premises. The next few slides hopefully will show those alterations that have taken place. Some of them are more obvious, some of them are more subtle. Perhaps the most conspicuous on this front elevation drawing is the branded Vision Express signage. It's just worth making clear that that signage is the subject of the advert application and does not form a part of this full application. The other alterations worth drawing your attention to, again, some of them are more subtle. On the front elevation on the left-hand side, you will see this glazing, this window, which has been enlarged and elongated, and a pair of fascias installed above and below. Those fascias are shorter in height than the ones that preceded them. These are a pair of sectional drawings which show both the left-hand side of the front facade and then the right-hand side of the front facade. The left-hand side is facing towards the kind of the Barton Street direction, if you like, and the right-hand side is taken from the opposing view, so facing towards the cross. And that's what it looks like in the daytime. That's a photo. The reason why I've seen fit to distinguish between the daytime and the nighttime elevations is because perhaps the most noteworthy aspect of the application is the installation of a roller shutter, and that roller shutter is down outside of opening hours. So you'll see that before 8:30 in the morning and after 5:30 in the evening. So that's why I've distinguished between daytime and nighttime. The roller shutter is solid, it's not perforated, it's a brown stroke black in its colour, and it has been installed externally, so it's flush with the external facade of the shop front. And that's what it looks like from the street, you'll see there. The next couple of slides just show the alterations that have been enacted to the building's side elevation. Again, these are comparatively subtle compared to the roller shutter. What we see here is on the right-hand pair of windows, above each of them has been installed a new fascia, but the size of that fascia is unchanged from the one that preceded it. And you'll see both of them in the next photo. Again, it's quite subtle, those changes to the side elevation. So the next couple of slides just contain excerpts from a number of the key policies that are referenced within the report. I don't propose to relitigate what was justified within the report, because that's what the report's there for, but I thought this might just be a useful opportunity to show some of the more visual parts of the relevant policies. So members will observe that we're recommending refusal for two main reasons. one of those relating to the character and appearance of the conservation area, and the other relating to a policy conflict with a bundle of policies which relate to design and visual amenity. So those are recommended as distinct reasons for refusal. What you can see on the screen at the moment is an excerpt from the Council's adopted shopfront shutters and signage supplementary planning document. And quite helpfully, it's an illustrated guide. So what we can see on the left-hand side here is an illustration of what you might call solutions to shopfront security, which are considered more appropriate on the left-hand side, ranging to outright unacceptable on the right. And the guide is quite unequivocal about solid shutters, such as that which has been installed here, being considered unacceptable. It also contains photos as examples, and on the right-hand side is one such photo, whereby it's quite a similar one to what's been installed at Vision Express, with a shutter occupying broadly the middle third of the shop front with open glazing retained on either side. The guide makes it explicit that such proposals are unacceptable. In the top left of this slide, you will see another excerpt from the guide, which elaborates upon the reasons why solid shutters are considered unacceptable. Now, you'll find that quote also within paragraph 6.12 of the report, and it's also quoted in the Conservation Officer's comments. And it talks about the damaging effect that they have on the character of the street scene and shopping area. It talks about the resultant impacts upon natural surveillance, or the lack thereof, and of lighting, and how they discourage pedestrian activity and can lead to less footfall and greater opportunities for crime and fear of crime. And indeed, those kind of aspects are touched upon by a bundle of other policies within our adopted development plan, those in the green box there, so policies F3 and F7, which talk about safe communities, active frontages, promoting pedestrian activity, etc. So those aspects form the basis of the second reason for refusal, in part in terms of community safety. The other one is a conservation reason for refusal, which derives from the conservation objection. Members might observe that some of the changes to the shop front are relatively subtle, some more subtle than others. The National Planning Policy Framework is quite prescriptive in terms of how officers, councils, etc. are obliged to consider aspects that have impacts upon conservation assets and designated assets, such as this one. Paragraph 212 of the NPPF states that great weight is to be applied to such applications in such instances. In other words, no matter the size or the scale of that alteration which affects upon the conservation asset, we are to treat that with the utmost seriousness. Paragraph 215 prescribes how we are to assess that in terms of weighing up that harm against any public benefits of the proposal. In this instance, officers have not identified any public benefits of the proposal, nor were any put forward by the applicant, and so the harm that the conservation officer has identified is considered to outweigh the proposal's public benefits. And just finally, before I leave you with the two reasons for refusal, members may also observe that the building is in what you might describe as a less historic part of the conservation area, but it is nonetheless within the conservation area. And Historic England guidance dictates that where the significance of a heritage asset, including a conservation area, for example, has already been compromised by past unsympathetic development, that does not provide justification for future unsympathetic development. So indeed, that's the kind of guidance that has informed the recommendation made by the Conservation Officer, but also that made within the Officer report. And you'll see that guidance quoted within paragraph 6.29 of the report. So as I say, I will leave you with just a brief summary of the two reasons for refusal, which you will obviously find in full in the Officer report, those relating to the conservation area and to wider visual amenity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have no public speakers to speak on this item, so we can go straight to members' questions. Please ask questions that are of material interest to the application. If it's already mentioned in the report, there's no need to ask for reiteration. Direct and relevant questions to myself or to the relevant officer, please.
Thanks, Chair. I find this a bit incredulous. Did they or did they not know about the policies? Because if they did, to me, they're flagging it. But I just want to make sure that they've had all the relevant information about the shutters and why they're not, or shall we say, applicable.
It's difficult to say. Obviously, they carried out the works without the benefit of planning permission or advertisement consent. The retrospective nature of the application ultimately doesn't comprise a planning consideration. So there's not really much way in which we could take that into account. I'm not sure whether they did or didn't know about these policies, but they are publicly available on the council's website in the adopted development plans. And as with all applications, we engaged constructively with the applicants. So that's all I probably could say to that effect. Does that answer your question?
Councillor Weiderhold.
Thank you, Chair. Does the applicant have any explanation for the need for roller shutter doors? Because if they're there to provide security, I would have thought that the glass windows to the side are accessible to anyone. So I can't see the purpose of roller shutter doors. They don't seem to add any value whatsoever, in my opinion.
I think email correspondence between ourselves and the council as officers and the applicant indicated that it was, I suppose, predictably for security concerns. Beyond that, I'm not sure. And to be honest, the reasoning itself doesn't necessarily constitute a planning consideration. I suppose what you'll see in the illustrated excerpt that I showed during the presentation was that the shopfront shutters and signage guide, I suppose, prescribes what it considers as more desirable and less desirable security solutions, for want of a better phrase. So they've opted for one that falls foul of the guidelines. But that's probably all I could say to that point.
Harris.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, obviously we're the landlord of the property. Was this work undertaken, obviously it's without planning permission, but was it done also without council permission? Did they just do it, or did they ask someone at the council to say, I would like to make some changes to the building, is this okay? And that was said, yeah, go ahead. I was just wondering where the kind of decisions around making these changes came from.
Thank you, Chair. When the building was let, it's my understanding that building tenancy agreements are always subject to planning. During the course of the application, they served notice on the council that they were making works to the building. As far as I know, there's not been given any permission per se by the asset management team, but they are beholden to their agreement, which requires them to secure the planning permission. So it's a bit of a over to you planners type situation, because they're not going to, obviously, it would not be of any benefit for the asset management team to give planning advice to the tenant outside of this local planning authority process.
I think what you're asking is, did they get the permission under the terms of their lease? Because there would have been a covenant in the lease to say that they needed permission to do any alterations to the building. That is a separate consideration and doesn't really impact on the planning decision-making process today.
Thank you. Councillor Castle.
Okay. I'm just asking, how did this come to light in the first place?
By how did it come to light in terms of how
was
did
it noted?
that they had carried out these works without permission? The application, one of the applications, I believe, came in prior to them carrying out the work. So upon receipt of the full application, they had not yet enacted the works. So the works took place in between the full application being received and validated. By the time the application was validated, the initial works that they were applying for were a more expansive range of shopfront alterations. The ones that they ultimately enacted at the property were less expansive than those that were originally applied for. So the application before you today is amended from the original application. They're basically seeking consent retrospectively only for those works which they have carried out. I mean, the premises are very close to the council's offices, so it's not the type of thing that council officers wouldn't notice. But regardless of that sort of lineage of who saw what at which time, we're obliged to treat the application in the same manner, regardless of that. The fact of it being retrospective, or the fact of it having been amended at certain points to only seek retrospective permission, is sort of tangential, really, to the facts of the matter, which is that our job is to assess the planning application on its own merits. Does that? Hopefully that answers your question. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Harris.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you can help me understand some of the changes. But so the roller shutters is a very obvious change. I've been looking at the before and after pictures and the maps. I'm struggling to quite identify the exact other changes, because other than that, it looks pretty much the same to me.
Yeah, and I think that's a very fair observation. The roller shutter is the most conspicuous change that they're making. The other changes that they're seeking to make are subtle. Yeah, that's not in doubt. So in terms of the front elevation, if we flick between what we would ordinarily call the existing elevation, it's not the existing, it's the former elevation, I suppose. What you'll see is a window on the left-hand side. So if you look at the shop front, we've got a pair of doors in the middle, a fascia running along the top, sort of right-hand side 2/3, which is where the Vision Express signage has been installed, a big glazing panel on the right-hand side, and then a comparatively smaller window on the left-hand side. I'm hovering my cursor, but I don't think you can see it on the screen. On the left-hand side, we've got that sort of square window. And above and below that are kind of our fascia panels, our panels. There we go. We've got a laser pointer now. Yeah, so this left-hand side that this square window here. The application, or the changes that they've made to the property, as I said, you're absolutely right, they are subtle. This window here has basically been elongated, and the fascia panels above and below have been made shorter. So yeah, you're not wrong. That is nothing if not a subtle change, but it is a change that they've made as a result of the application. The other change worth drawing your attention to, and again, it's nothing if not subtle, is that which has been made to the side elevation, so this is the elevation of the facade to Queen's Walk, and the right-hand pair of windows, which are these that we can see here, have each had a fascia panel installed above, unbranded, just a fascia panel. Again, that's a very subtle change. To the naked eye, you might not notice that, but they are counted as physical developments, so are contained within the application. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I'm just looking at, so there's a picture of as it is now. If you could go back a couple of slides to that one. So the one you showed is what they're asking permission for, shows that window being larger, although that window looks the same as was before. So are we saying they want to change that as part of this? Not they've already done that. So is that part not retrospective because that appears to not have been done? Or if it has, it's just that slight, I can't tell the difference.
Yeah, it's a good observation. It doesn't appear as if, just based upon flicking between the photos, it doesn't appear as if that has been enacted. With the exception of, you'll see this little bit at the top of the window, there's a black panel here, which no longer is there. So that has taken effect. I suppose whichever way you look at it, the application is applying for permission to do the work stipulated on the plans. So whether those works have already been undertaken or they intend to undertake them in the future, we're ultimately assessing the same proposals. But it is a very good observation, yeah.
So if we were to say that, hypothetically, if we were okay with the changes they've got, apart from the roller shutters, what would be the process for that? Would we approve of a condition of no to the roller shutters?
The planning application is as it is in its entirety. It can't be split into component parts. So you're going to have to determine the application as is. You can't pick and choose what you're going to grant, what you're not going to grant. It has to be dealt with on its totality.
Are there any more questions? I think we can move on to debate. Who would like to make a first comment? Councillor Lewis?
I'm always first, aren't I? I don't dislike it. We start with that, but it's going against the NPPF and our rules and regulations, and I just don't see how we can go against our own regulations, to be perfectly honest. I accept what Liam said about that window. It looks like they haven't done anything to it, and maybe good job, but I just can't vote for it, to be perfectly honest, on the roller shutters and that, because they're flaunting our rules and regulations, which our officers and the conservation people have put together. And if we start a precedent with this one, what's coming next? So I think let's draw the line in the sand and refuse this, as the officers ask us to.
Councillor Marshall?
Thank you, Chair. I agree along the lines of Councillor Lewis that, it looks nice, but we can't just let them get away with it when, it could happen across the street, especially now as we have a lot more sort of mini markets opening up. It doesn't make the city centre look attractive, but I know that one looks attractive and it's a good example, but we must model it for all of the shops and businesses that set up in town. So we have to go by the rules. Thank you.
Councillor Wiederhold?
Thank you, Chair. I'm frankly astonished that a nationwide organisation has done this without planning permission. Had it been a small business that had never operated before and they thought they could do this kind of thing, I'd be more sympathetic to them. But a nationwide organisation that comes along to Gloucester and says, we're going to ignore planning, I'm sorry, I can't approve this.
Thank you. Any more comments from anybody else? Councillor Castle?
I just want to say the same as the rest of you, really. It's a shame we can't split it, because I think, it's okay, the glasswork on there, but we just can't approve it when it goes against everything that we're trying to make the, Gloucester better. So I won't be voting for it. Thank you.
Thank you. I have to say I agree. The asymmetry doesn't bother me particularly, but the roller shutters do. So again, I would vote against. So I think we're ready to vote. The officer's recommendation is to refuse planning permission for the reasons given. Does anybody second that? Yes, thank you. So can you all raise your hands if you're in favour of refusing permission, please? I think that's unanimous. Yeah. Thank you very much. So we move on to agenda item 6, the same property. I'll ask the Senior Planning Officer to introduce this report Again, no registered speakers on the item. So we'll hear the report and then move to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, moving on to the second of the two applications at the same address. This is a retrospective application seeking advertisement consent for the internally illuminated fascia sign. So that's the branded signage which you saw on the previous slide. This application is before committee for the same reason as the previous one, which is that it is on council-owned land. And there have been objections received. I don't propose to dwell too much on the site location plan and the site context because we've just been over that. So in short, this is the application which seeks permission for the branded signage you can see here on the front elevation drawing. So the signage on the right-hand 2/3 of the shop front bearing the lettering and the insignia and the logo of Vision Express. It is a powder-coated aluminium fascia panel, as I say, stretching across roughly 2/3 of the shop front. Here you can see a sectional drawing of it. So this is a section and we're almost facing towards the cross here, if you see what I mean. So what this shows, and you might have to squint, is that the signage itself is 80 millimetres in depth, so that's 8 centimetres. This is what it looks like. You'll have seen this photo in the previous slide. And yeah, again, much like the previous application, the recommendation in the committee report is made for two reasons, really, the reasons for refusal. One has to do, again, with the impacts upon the conservation area, and the other has to do with the conflict with a series of other design policies related to other aspects of design other than heritage. So what I've got, again, is a series of excerpts from a bunch of different plans, policies, including, again, the shopfront shutters and signage guide. This guide is very prescriptive and very categorical about the types of fascia sign and the types of illumination that are permitted, including within the conservation area. In the not permitted list includes internally illuminated signs, such as that which has been proposed here. In the permitted list includes individual halo illumination, which is not what they've proposed here, but is what is considered typically more appropriate within a heritage. So this is from section 4.3. Section 4.5 says much the same thing. It says internally illuminated fascias, lettering and projected box signs will not be permitted within conservation areas or on listed buildings. And of course, we're within the city centre conservation area here. And policy F7, which relates to the shopfront guide, says much the same thing. Now, you could be forgiven for not fully understanding the difference and the distinction between internally illuminated signage and halo illumination, which is why I've put this slide in there. So internal illumination tends to consist of boxier signage with letters carved out of the sign itself, with a light inside, so a light source inside the sign, inside the box, which projects through the gaps in the sign. That's effectively what it is. The end result typically would be illumination that is brighter, more glaring, you might say a bit more indiscriminate, for want of a better word. The conservation officer in her comments uses the phrase boxy, internally illuminated and bright synthetic appearance. By contrast, halo signage, illuminated signage, which is what the SPD, the shopfront guide, asks for, typically will come hand in hand with individually applied lettering. So these actually are two examples from Eastgate Street itself, so a stone's throw away from the site, really. The left-hand example is from taken from the guide itself, and that is where you can see individual lettering, each sort of carved out and suspended in front of the fascia rather than being flush to the fascia itself. The right-hand side is just across the road, and that's quite a good example because that was permitted in December 2024, so under the current policy regime. And that, again, is fascia individually applied lettering, so suspended in front of the fascia, with a halo from behind. So it's a backlit, the letters are backlit from behind. The overall effect is a bit softer, a bit gentler, more diffuse, you might say. So halo illumination is what the relevant planning policy, including the SPD, which we were just looking at, asks for. And it's quite explicit in discouraging internal illumination, not least in the conservation area. So again, we're beholden to the same NPPF sort of instruction as was outlined in the previous presentation. The Conservation Officer has objected. So paragraph 212 again asks us to give great weight to the conservation of designated heritage assets. What that means in one sense is that even if an application within the conservation area is smaller, more subtle, we're still obliged to treat that with the utmost seriousness and the harm to the asset in question, the conservation area, with the utmost seriousness. And paragraph 215 obliges us to weigh up that harm against the public benefit. And again, neither the Conservation Officer nor planning officers have been able to identify any public benefit of the proposal, and nor has the applicant put forward any as part of the application. And I suppose the final thing that I'll leave you with before the reasons for refusal is, again, the same Historic England guidance, which, again, says that when we are dealing with a conservation asset which may have been degraded by past development, unsympathetic development, or within a part of the conservation area which might be less historic, less sympathetic to the sort of heritage values, quote unquote, that does not provide justification for future unsympathetic development. And you'll see that quote from Historic England is quoted within the Conservation Officer's comments and is also quoted within the officer report in paragraph 6.18. You can find the weighing up of the harm versus public benefit. That exercise is undertaken both in the Conservation Officer's comments as well as within paragraph 6.16 of the report. There's a bunch of other policies that are relevant, and some of them are conflicted by the application, and they're sort of wider design policies which are the subject of the second reason for refusal. So the final slide is just to give you an overview of those reasons for refusal, which you can find in full at the end of the report. The first relating to the conservation area, and the second relating to questions of wider visual amenity and design. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. We move on to members' questions. Is there anybody who'd like to ask a question? Councillor Weir-de-Hoop.
Thank you, Chair. Do we know if there are any energy benefits in one type of lighting compared to the other that may be in the public interest?
Truth be told, I don't know the answer to that question, but whether there are or there aren't, the applicant hasn't submitted anything that would demonstrate as such. I'm not entirely sure whether that would be considered. It could only feasibly be considered a planning consideration, to the best of my knowledge, were that to be a public benefit. But as I say, I don't think the applicant has submitted anything to demonstrate as such. So in the absence of that demonstration, we probably would say no, I suppose. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it does. I was just speculating that one may benefit, but if they haven't bothered to look into that and propose it themselves, then we'll have to accept it as is.
Councillor Harris.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if officers are aware of any other examples where a shop has the kind of the 3D style lettering on it that also has their same brand kind of theme, so it's a light coloured text on dark background. Because looking at this example, you want the lights, if you've got bright white text, you want that to be the bit that's light, not the bit being lit up behind it. So I'm just trying to understand if there's any other kind of other way of doing this, or because it feels to me personally, looking at it, I quite like the design. I think it looks reasonable for the colour contrast of their style. I think the way they've gone about it, I think, is not great. But I'm just trying to understand what an alternative could potentially look like in their scenario.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any comments to make?
Do you want the officer to respond?
Oh, sorry.
I'm more than happy to. I'm not entirely sure that I understood your question. I suppose if I've interpreted correctly, you're drawing attention to the fact that whichever style of signage and illumination they went for, they would want to have a contrast between the lettering and the sign behind anyway. So that would be a feature of any proposal for signage, which may be true, but ultimately the application we're assessing is the one we've got here. I think the other part of your question was saying what other solutions or types of illumination and lettering might there be, which again, we're assessing the application we've got in front of us. Within the conservation area itself, and including on Eastgate Street, you've got a variety of signs or shop fronts that feature individually applied lettering, so the ones where the lettering is suspended in front of the fascia rather than flush to it. You've got the two that I included in the slide, so you've got 3 here, which I believe isn't illuminated, although I stand to be corrected. A lot of signage within the conservation area doesn't feature illumination whatsoever. I suppose they achieve a contrast by virtue of this being black lettering on the white sign. But yeah, you'll find that a lot of signage within the conservation area isn't illuminated. Howden here is a good example of individually applied lettering, again suspended in front with the halo illumination coming from behind. So even though the letters themselves aren't illuminated, there's a glow emanating around them. And I believe Waterstone,
So Waterstones is an example of a black background with white lettering, non-illuminated, and it stands out anyway. You're always going to get high contrast when you have white lettering on a black background, regardless of its illumination or not. The other option, which isn't for discussion tonight, but external illumination is also possible if it's done in a conservation area style. So there are options available. This isn't an internally illuminated, those are 2 hard words to put together, box sign is not the only option, and certainly there are plenty of shop fronts within the conservation area that have followed the rules and have appropriate signage.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? I think we can move into debate if anybody wants to start. Councillor Lewis.
I basically reiterate what I said before. If they're going against our rules, I'm sorry. And my esteemed colleague here has actually got up on Vision Express shops, and this is an anomaly. To be perfectly honest, they have just white white lettering on black background. So it's not just here; it's obviously elsewhere. And also is it Chewy that's a bit further on up? They got the external lights coming down. That brass one looks very nice, quite tasty. This is going against our rules, and I'm sorry I can't vote for it either.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think that it does look very attractive, but once again, it's not following the rules. And I know that Vision Express, they can actually look at adapting it because, they've got different sort of sign versions of the signs, and I'm sure they would adapt it, for a historical, area, a heritage site. So I don't think, it's right to leave it as it is, obviously, and it needs to be adapted.
Thank you. Is that an end to... Oh, no, Council... No? Okay, everybody's finished. Okay. I think we can move to the vote then. So the recommendation is to refuse, which I'm proposing. Can I have a seconder? Yes, Councillor Marshall, thank you. All those in favour of refusal? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. I think we're ready to move on to the next agenda item, number 7. Beforehand, I must read out what I should have started the meeting with, because we do have a speaker here. This meeting is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. The recording of the meeting will remain online for 4 years. And if you are present in the chamber, you are consenting to appearing in the recording and broadcast, which may also be used for training purposes. If you've registered as a speaker, you're consenting to the use of sound and video recordings for broadcasting and training purposes. I will call the speakers forward and ask them to make their 5-minute representation. So if I can have the speaker, please, and this is... Oh, sorry, first of all, I'm... Sorry, presentation first of all. Thank you. I'm dazed and confused.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee. This application before you is for 18 Kingsholm Road. This is a proposed conversion from a vacant small HMO to an 8-bedroom large HMO, and that's being facilitated through the installation of a dormer window to the rear. So just to get your bearings on the site, you'll notice, if my pointer works, there we are, we're right opposite the car park and the corner of the Kingsholm Stadium. That's where the property is there. And you'll notice from this slide here that it's a predominantly residential area and very of its time period kind of set up there. So this is the existing site plan. It incorporates an access to the north, which leads to the rear garden. And just of note from this, either side of the property, so to the north and the south, are 2 properties already small HMOs themselves. This is the proposed site plan. The elements on here you can see are a bin store to the front, a bike store to the rear, and the dormer window, although I'm going to take you on a much closer look at that because it's a bit tricky to see from there. So here's the existing elevations, things to note. So bay window, period property. We've got a small dormer on the front, a window on the rear, but no dormer on the rear. So as I go through to the proposed, you'll see the only change is here on the rear roof. Let's go there. So here we have the dormer window. So this is to be constructed in tiles and materials to match the existing roof. It's not a full dormer, it's sat down from the ridge. It's fairly subservient in terms of the wider roofscape. And this dormer window facilitates the extra bedroom space. There's no further external changes of note. Moving you along, that's the existing floor plan. The property's been vacant for 2 years, I believe. And this is the proposed floor plan. So of note is the dormer window here. Each of the bedrooms is served by an ensuite bathroom, and there's a good amount of communal space for kitchen and living on the ground floor. So this application's had a series of consultations. That's because we were working proactively to get the rear bike store in a position that the neighbour was happier with. We've had 3 neighbour comments and 1 objection from Councillor Hilton, who called the application to committee. So the objections are on page 48 of the agenda, 5.2 to 5.5 in the report. By the 3rd round of consultation, we had no further comments from the public. In terms of our consultees and specialists, we had no objections from Housing Strategy, who are supportive of the application, no objections to highways following clarification of the side access and the provision of the bin and bike store, and no objection from drainage, subject to a flood warning and evacuation plan, which we've conditioned, and no objection from Conservation Archaeology or Waste, who are happy with the arrangements for the bins. Now, whenever we're looking at HMO, The key policy is obviously A2, which is our HMO policy and the city plan. So there are a number of criteria that need to be met on a HMO policy, and this property is compliant in all three areas. So it doesn't result in any sandwiching of a family dwelling. It doesn't result in two or more large HMOs being next to each other. So just to remind members that small HMOs do not require the benefit of planning permission because their impact is not considered significant enough for the government to make it necessary for us to require them to have planning permission. So we don't count small HMOs in the application of policy A2. So 16 and 20 already being HMOs doesn't create two large HMOs in a row. What it would prevent in the future, 16 and 20, sorry, not 18 is the application site, 16 and 20 would not be able to convert to a large HMO in the future because then we'd have two together. Not that that is a consideration for your decision making, that's just a fact of the implication of the application should you be minded to approve. So within the 100-metre radius, that's the other test, is the saturation test. We don't want to see more than 10% of the properties within that 100-metre radius being large HMOs, and that just helps us keep a balanced character to the area. Now, we've run the tests, we get our information from licensing, from planning history. The applicant also has to provide this information as part of their validation, and we check all of that, and we score that as being 1%, because this would be the only large HMO in that radius, and so well within the 10% that we permit in an area to protect its character. You would need to find, there's always, have we found them all? Are there any that aren't licensed or, not gone through proper process? But you'd need to find another 9 to get over the 100, over the 10% in this radius. But we're pretty confident with the data. We've double checked with licensing, so we're pretty clear that we are comfortable that this is policy compliant. Let's look at some of the issues. So in terms of amenity, we had some concern from neighbours about noise, but that would be temporary during the construction, and I'm afraid is just part of the course of construction. We were slightly concerned about this window-to-window relationships. We've got a window in the side of 18 and 20. That's an existing situation, so we've got direct overlooking already. We have proposed a condition to obscure that window. Otherwise, we think the impacts are very limited. The bin and bike store are very kind of small in scale. They're not over the fence height or anything like that. Let's take a look in terms of residential amenity. Obviously, we always want to create housing that's decent, of good quality and standard, and is going to serve the future occupiers well. We're comfortable that the level of internal amenity space is adequate for the number of residents, and that there's communal storage, and all of the bedrooms exceed our requirements as part of the National Described Space Standards for square metres, so we're comfortable with the size of the bedrooms. Transport-wise, this is an incredibly sustainable location. We've got a cycle spine appearing along that road. We have cycleway. We've got, very close to local services. There will be a bike, covered and secure bike parking for each resident of the property. There is no off-street parking, and there's no getting around that really. But there is a parking permit scheme in operation in that area, and they are 200 metres from the nearest public car park. So overall, we're happy that that's compliant with our transport policies. Give you a quick look at the bin and bike storage. So this is the bin storage to the front. At the moment, there is no bin storage. You can see the recycling bins just out there. And then the bike store to the rear, which is accessed through the side passage. That's 80 centimetres tall. Let's go across to the design. So obviously, flat roof scooted you on too fast there. There we are. Flat roof dormer. Let's be honest, they're not beautiful things, but, you know, it's of a scale that's subservient to the main roof. There's the conservation officer's happy that there's no impact on the neighbouring conservation area. This isn't in the conservation area, but it's close to one. The external materials will match. I think that's as good as we can get with with something of this nature. It could have been, you know, up to the ridgeline and much more dominating, and we would not be supportive of something that was larger in scale. So we're comfortable with the design of the dormer, and also thinking about the planning balance. You know, we have a very limited 5-year housing land supply, currently at 3.1 years. We had an appeal in the city, which is in the report. You can read that in the report at 6.13. You know, where the inspector was spoke very favourably about increasing the occupancy of HMOs, and saw that increase in occupants as a more effective use of the land, as long as you can get, obviously, the design to provide good living conditions internally. We're not in the business of upping the occupancy to such a rate that there's no communal space, or, you know, and this property also has a good rear garden. So there on the screen is the list of the benefits, the neutral effects and the disbenefits of the proposal. But on balance, we consider that the adverse impacts would not significantly outweigh the benefits of the proposal, and therefore our recommendation is for delegated authority to the planning manager, subject to the conditions which are in the report and the late material, because we also, because we need to get a unilateral undertaking completed for mitigation to the Cotswold Beechwood Sacks. So once that's all signed and paid for and sealed, we can issue a planning permission. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to invite Stuart Homewood from Albion Quarters, Director of Albion Quarters, to speak. You have 5 minutes. Would you like a 1-minute warning?
No, I'm fine, thanks. I only prepped for 4, so we should be okay. Thank you. Chair and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name's Stuart. As the chair said, and I'm a director of Albion Quarters. We provide housing for students and professionals in Gloucestershire, and we're the applicant for this proposal at 18 Kingsholm Road. It's important to begin by highlighting that the property was previously a lawful HMO under use class C4. The principle of the HMO use of this address has therefore already been established and accepted, and our proposal seeks to amend that existing to an 8-bed sui generis HMO for single occupants only. Concerns have been raised regarding the HMO properties in the area. However, this application does not introduce a new HMO into the locality. Rather, it is an adjustment to the scale of an extant lawful HMO, and as such, it does not materially contribute to overconcentration. The property was vacant for a short period prior to our ownership due to dilapidation. We have commenced internal refurbishment work to bring it back into a high standard of residential use, providing comfortable, safe and compliant accommodation for those who require it. This proposal enables the building to be fully utilised and contributes to housing supply within the existing urban area without development on new land, and the footprint of the building remains unchanged. To our knowledge, the planning officer has recommended her approval, and the proposal has been assessed against policy A2 of the Gloucester City Plan and the relevant national planning policy, and is considered acceptable in planning terms. An 8-bed HMO occupied by single adults does not inherently generate activity beyond that of a large family dwelling. Furthermore, the property will be subject to a mandatory HMO licensing, ensuring a proper and appropriate management, safety standards and responsible occupation. Externally, the property remains a single dwelling house. There is no subdivision into flats, no alterations to the frontage, and no harm to the residential character of the street. The proposed rear dormer is domestic in scale and typical of roof alterations in the area. Its position at the rear preserves the street scene and does not result in unacceptable overlooking. Materials have been carefully selected to reflect the character of the existing property. Parking has also been raised as a concern with this application. For clarity, the property benefits from 2 permitted on-street parking spaces and is located close to public transport links and local services. National planning policy is clear that development should only be refused on highways grounds where the impact would be severe. There is no evidence before members that this proposal would result in a severe impact on highways, and therefore it should be deemed acceptable. It should not be assumed that each bedroom equates to a vehicle. In our experience, single working adults in accessible locations typically have low levels of car ownership, preferring to walk, cycle, or utilise the extensive local transport provision. Secure bicycle storage has been provided to promote sustainable travel. Refuge storage has also been carefully considered. The proposed front location is the most practical and will be screened by the existing boundary wall and hedgerow, limiting any visual impact. Many properties along this road store bins to the front, and our proposal will ensure orderly, well-managed arrangement. In conclusion, this application complies with both local and national policy. It brings a vacant property back into useful, productive use and provides high-quality managed accommodation and results in no demonstrable planning harm. For those reasons, I respectfully request that members support the officer's recommendation and grant planning consent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we move to members' questions. Councillor Harris, thank you.
Yeah, so first question, the bicycle storage, do we know what the capacity of that is? Will that support 8 individual bicycles for all occupants?
Through you, Chair. Yes, it should. The requirement is 1 per bedroom space, and we've also got the condition in the late material to ensure that it's installed and maintained for the lifetime of the development.
Cool. And Secretary, I'm looking at the bin layout at the front. Do you have any data on what an appropriate number of bins would be for an 8-person property? Because I'm looking at this and it's showing 2 wheelie bins and only 6 recycling bins. Now I'm thinking between 8 people, between all the different types of recycling and regular waste, and if you've got garden waste and normal waste, you're probably only going to have space for 1 wheelie bin, and between 8 people I don't think that's going to be enough.
Through you, Chair. The bin situation was looked at by the waste team and they were satisfied with the arrangements. That's all I can say in terms of how many bins will be used and what was required. I think we have to take the experts' opinion on it, and if they thought it was inadequate, they definitely would have let us know.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis? No? Okay. Anybody else? Councillor Wiederhold?
Chair, I did have a question about why it was vacant, but that's been answered. I also had a question about how many car spaces would be allowed, and that's been answered as well. So I have no questions.
Anybody else? Councillor Carson?
Okay. My question is also about the concern about the wheelie bins. Obviously, you've covered how many, but is the access to the wheelie bins? So I see that it's a flip top. How easy is it? So is it a flip top that opens and then you've got, so that balances open, or is it a clip that keeps it open? And also then you've got the other wheelie bin that's got to be opened again. I know that we need easy access or people won't bother with them. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. The bin storage is as included there on that design. It looks as though the top opens along with the bin. We're satisfied that the bin storage is provided, although always using a bin store is not as convenient as just leaving the bin out. It does provide a more visual benefit to the street scene to have them tucked away inside bin storage. Does that...
Any more questions? Councillor Weederhill.
Sorry, I did come up with a question. Is there a requirement for an HMO of more than 8 occupants or more, for any disabled access for at all?
Well, through you, Chair, thank you. Obviously, any works have to comply with building regulations. Our HMO guide does ask for properties to consider having a wheelchair accessible unit where possible. But when it's a conversion of a period home, that's not always achievable. And there, we do allow, when there is a period property, that is not always possible given the corridor widths and things that are already existing. So it's not a planning requirement. It's a nice to have, and we do try and negotiate it wherever we can. But where we can apply the accessible and adaptable homes, we would do that, and it would be a requirement, but it's a little bit different when it's a conversion.
Thank you for that. Let's hope the future occupants aren't all rugby players who get themselves injured then.
Councillor Gravels.
I heard the speaker say that he expected some of the people living there to be veterans. Or did I mishear? He didn't. Okay, the acoustics here are pretty awful. No, okay. So, no, okay. So I can't ask, can I say, would you think some of them ought to be veterans?
Not asking any.
Thank you. Councillor Harris.
Yeah, just going back to the bin store as well, looking at the current images of it, it looks as though it's a grassed area or potentially partially gravelled area. Moving a wheelie bin, especially a full one, across a gravelled area would be incredibly difficult. And I imagine people would think, oh, stuff it, I'm not going to put it back there and leave it out. Can we add a condition that there be a smooth surface access to the bin storage so that it can be wheeled in and out with ease?
As you know, there are criteria for conditions. One criteria would fall down on would be, is it necessary? And not for this particular application, it would not be necessary. It would be necessary to curtail the noise made by the bins, but certainly would not be necessary for this application to be successful and satisfy relevant planning considerations. So I don't think so, no. It would be nice to have such a condition, but nice is not sufficient to have a condition imposed to make a particular development acceptable.
I guess, could you argue that it would be necessary on the grounds of obviously safety of moving through? Because I've had a couple of times where I've been moving a bin and it's knocked a curb and it's tipped and whatnot, but also from a street scene, keeping things tidy. I know we've looked at things about trying, how do we encourage to make sure people take their bins away? Not having that would potentially encourage that bin to be left out either on the street, because there wouldn't be room on the pathway to then walk past it. It would encourage it to be left on the street. So I think it is probably necessary to ensure that good bin etiquette is maintained at the property.
You could put in an informative to that effect, but I think to satisfy, it's a higher hurdle, satisfy the necessary principle. Is it really necessary for the development to take place? Not really, no. So it's desirable, and for that reason, I think an informative would be appropriate.
Just to add to that as well, if the applicant was so minded after hearing the committee's debate and reading the informative, they wouldn't need planning to put in the paving slabs to the bin store. So it'd be quite a simple fix for them to do that.
Are there any more questions? No, I think we can move to debate if there's any. Councillor Lewis, Councillor Marshall, and then Councillor Woodhull.
In regards to what Liam was on about, the majority of the houses down there are concrete fronts anyway, because they've come across this position all the way through. And I should go down there quite often, should we say. But I think this is actually, it's not changing the design of the whole place at all. And I think it's, you know, providing, isn't there 8 people off our waiting list, isn't it? I think it's a very good use of the actual house that's been empty for, I think it was 2 years, something like that. And the parking, there's 2 spaces, but then there's 16,000 people use it now and again around about the place. So the parking, I park in Hare Lane. So it's, I can't see anything to argue with this at all, to be perfectly honest. It's a good use of a dilapidated building, and I look forward to sort of seeing 8 people live in it.
Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, I think the plan seems really good actually, and also we've got to remember that we've just got opened up the new university, and so there's going to be a need for accommodation across the city. So it's an ideal location for students and from Gloucestershire Uni and Hartbury College. And I don't see any issues at all with the planning whatsoever. And I don't think the wheelie bin thing is relevant because I've got gravel in my porch, so it'd be, you know, you can't just stigmatise, you know, we don't want to stigmatise people because of, you know, it's shared housing, because there's a lot of professional people that come to the city for professional jobs and working in HMOs. They're very useful for people that are just starting out and then, you know, moving on. And it is transition, but it does have a lot of benefits to the area.
Thank you. Councillor Woodhull, then Councillor Gravitt.
Thank you, Chair. I was disappointed to read that the property was vacant, but that's been explained as it was dilapidated. So what we're gaining is space for 8 people to live in Gloucester. And I think that's worth whatever any just benefits are. So thank you.
Councillor Gravels.
I think we're all going to be on the same page almost. I'm going to put a plug in for the people who work at the hospital. We're all always looking for homes for people who work at the hospital, key workers. So I think there's another area where you can help. I'm minded by the view of the inspector. I think that's a very clear message, and I think the inspector couldn't have been clearer in what she was requesting and suggesting that we do. I think it ticks all of the boxes. I think I was not intrigued, but I was surprised that there weren't more complaints, objections from their neighbours. I've read the papers again, and they are being addressed, so that's good. So hopefully there shouldn't be too much problem from for their neighbours who not have to, that's one way of putting it, who live next door to it. So my plug is for key workers at the hospital. I'm sure I'm going to be told there's no condition that we can put on what I'm going to suggest, but I do know, we all know, that veterans struggle to find accommodation in the city. Quite often they're not picked up by social housing because they're single, and that's not right. And I'm looking at you guys, there's no way, is there, that we can say to these people, X percentage should be veterans. I don't mean to be, you're shaking your head now, I expected you to, but I'm not being flippant, Chair. I'm not being flippant because it is a serious issue in Gloucester, and I hope that in the spirit of the meeting you will hear that and maybe be able to assist us. So I hope I can step again, because this has been a pleasure to support this application. Hope Pam takes more holidays.
We all do.
Thank you. Oliver.
I could address that directly by saying that it could be effectively undermined on all sorts of considerations, one of which would be, is it reasonable? And the answer would be no, not in this context, it wouldn't be reasonable. The other one is it relevant? not to, in this context? No, it's not relevant. Is it necessary? No, it's not necessary. So for all sorts of reasons, it can be struck down. I don't even think you can impose an informative to say, could you please take in veterans? This is a matter which has to be addressed by general, broad housing policy of the council.
And that's what I expected. And I'm not expecting anybody to break any legislation, but in the spirit of cooperation with the applicants or their agents, I just floated that idea, just to be very clear.
Councillor Lewis?
Being seen as I'm the Armed Forces champion, as it were, I think our housing people will actually be well aware of that. And I think you find a couple of single accommodation for the veterans, they'll go straight for it. And that when I mention it to them tomorrow, we might be doing all right.
Councillor Harris?
Yeah, I think it's a great use of the building. It's great to support students coming into the city, and it's ideal property for its use. I think my only concern is around the bins. I think has been mentioned. I think I'd like to see maybe a bit more done around there. But as for the scheme itself, it's not weighted enough to say no. So I'll be supporting this. I think it's a good use, and be good to see it in use again rather than being an empty property. I think I'd just encourage the guys to potentially look at if there are any improvements that can be made around the bin situation.
Thank you very much. I think we can go to the vote. And the proposal is to approve this application. And Councillor Lewis rushing to second. So everybody in favour? Yes, that's unanimous. That's excellent. Thank you very much. Happy to approve. Okay. Okay, that's the end of these discussions. We just have the agenda item 8, delegated decisions. Are members content to note the delegated decisions? Councillor Wiedehold?
I did write to the head of place on the Costco application because at planning we agreed that there would be 30 parking spaces, and we also agreed that those parking spaces should be near the door. On that application at the moment, that isn't shown. The head of place has responded to me to say that the final design of the car park is still to be agreed. So I'm content at the moment, but I will be keeping my eye on it.
Okay, so we're approving all of them with the caveat that that is being looked at. That's good. So I think that concludes our meeting for this evening. The next meeting will be Tuesday, the 7th of April. So thank you very much, everybody.